Everyone is currently talking about the Iran, Israel, and United States of America war that's happening in the Middle East, but very few people understand the historical context in which the geopolitical conditions that we see today were brewed in. So this video today is going to be us going through the history of Iran and US relations and seeing how we got to this point right now. To understand the history between Iran and the United States, we have to go back to the 1900s. At this point, Iran was called Persia, and it didn't exist as the Islamic Republic that we see today. It was an enormous country sitting on an insane amount of oil, an abundance of oil, but it was oil that it didn't control. It was controlled by the British. In 1901, a British businessman, William Knox Darcy, negotiates a consensus with the Iranian government. He negotiated the right to search and extract oil from Iran, and the Iranian government would be given 16% in future profits as well as £16,000. By 1913, oil had been discovered and the Anglo-Persian Oil Company was created. It was later named and turned into British Petroleum, what we know now as BP. And the Iranian oil was used to power British navies. So now obviously with Iran's oil being used to power the British Navy, it's now become a military resource and a military asset to the British Empire. Let's fast forward to 1941, World War II. At this point, Iranian oil is in control by Britain as well as the Soviet Union, but Iran is getting close to Germany. And the sitting Reza Shah at that time, you could call him a king, Reza Shah, he was seen to be cozying up with Germany, and that worried Britain and the Soviet Union. So they invaded Iran, removed him and forced him to abdicate his throne, and gave the throne to his son, Mohammad Reza Shah, who was 21 years old at the time and inexperienced. So he became like a shadow puppet for them and their interests. This is when we see America coming into the Iranian history and into the picture for the first time. So because America was a close ally, was on the side of the Allies during World War II, Iran became a supply corridor for the US. And this is the first time that we see Americans on Iranian soil and having access to Iran's supply corridors as well as their oil. After the war in 1951, something extraordinary happens in Iranian history. They have their first democratic elections, and Mohammad Mossadegh becomes the first democratically elected prime minister in the land of Iran. And he had very big visions for Iran. He studied in France and Switzerland, he wore ties, he was educated, he was a Democrat, and he wasn't what you would see today as your typical Iranian leader, or what you would imagine your typical Iranian leader to look like. He campaigned off of the idea of nationalizing Iranian oil and making Iranian oil Iranian again. And that's exactly what he did. In 1951, when he came into power, him and his parliament voted to nationalize Iranian oil, and it was the first time in over 50 years that the oil in Iran belonged to Iranians. And this decision obviously angered Britain. Now we're seeing the Anglo-Persian company completely removed from British hands and placed into the hands of the Iranian people, and this causes chaos. Britain immediately issues an oil embargo on Iran, ordering other countries not to purchase Iranian oil, not to send tankers, even went as far as taking the Iranian government to the International Criminal Court of Justice, in which they lose the case. And when all of these efforts failed and the Iranian government was still prosperous, they called on Washington. In 1953, the CIA and MI6 launched a joint operation, a covert operation called Operation Ajax, where they basically prepared and planned to overthrow the democratically elected leader Mohammad Mossadegh via a coup and take control of Iran. They bribed Iranian politicians, paid military officials, got Mossadegh supporters to go into streets and incite violence and create chaos, basically to get the people of Iran rioting and uprising against him. On the 19th of August 1953, the coup officially happens and Mossadegh is arrested in his home. He's then trialed by a military tribunal and sentenced to 3 years in prison, and he spends it under house arrest. He was placed under house arrest until he died 14 years later in 1967. The Shah, the 21-year-old the British Empire installed as king 12 years earlier, is now put back in power and is basically a puppet for Western interests in Iran and in the Middle East. Next 26 years, the United States of America give him money, they give him power, they give him resources, weapons, diplomatic cover, and in return, Iran stays pro-Western with oil flowing out and into the West. The Shah then creates a secret national police force called SAVAK. And SAVAK is not just supported by the CIA and America, they are trained by them, as well as Israel's Mossad. So SAVAK learns CIA and Mossad's interrogation tactics, the brutality tactics, their surveillance networks, as well as surveillance methods, all for the purpose of keeping the Shah in power. For 20 years, SAVAK tortures people, it arrests political leftists, political Democrats, anyone who had opposing views to the Shah or believed in regime change within Iran was arrested and tortured and killed. Thousands were killed under the brutality of SAVAK. And this is a part of the Iranian history that no one really talks about when discussing the 1979 revolution, is that the SAVAK was so oppressive on the Iranian people, their beliefs. It killed any political thought that was not aligned with the Shah. It repressed people. The human rights violations that were seen at the time were catastrophic. At this time, because of how intense the killings were and the political repressions was, there was only one organization that was able to withstand the SAVAK, and that was the religious clerks and religious leaders under Ayatollah Khamenei. In 1979, mass uprisings occur throughout Iran. The Shah is sick with cancer and does not have US backing anymore, and essentially a revolution erupts from the country. And that revolution births the land that we see today and the regime that we see today, the Islamic Republic of Iran. And after the 1979 revolution, we see the United States lose their strategic partner in the Middle East, Iran. And overnight, that relationship went from being an ally to being an enemy. The historical context that has birthed what we see today between the US and Iran's relations is very deep and very multifaceted. And I hope this video helped you understand a little bit more. I'm Maluleke, and this is IOL. Stay tuned for more updates.